Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. On April 27, 2014, the local police received a call from a man named Lon. Mr. Lon said that his son was missing. The missing person's name is Lon Kanu, 36 years old. He is the owner of a factory and a very diligent person at work. Normally, he would be busy all day, but on April 27th, even though it was late, the factory staff still did not see Kanu come. The factory had some work that needed him to decide, but because they could not contact him, they had to go to his father to ask if he knew where he was. At first, Mr. Lon simply thought that maybe his son went to negotiate a job or attend a party, so it was normal that he could not contact him for a while. But after calling many times without his son answering in the evening, he hurriedly contacted his son's girlfriend, Huang Jingwen, to see if she knew where he was. Jingwen was also very surprised when she heard. She said that she had not seen Kunyu since the evening of the 26th, still thinking that he might be busy and staying at the factory. Hearing this, the whole family anxiously searched everywhere for Kunyu's whereabouts. But until noon the next day, there was still no news. Only then did Mr. Lon realize that something might have happened to his son. So he hurriedly called the police station to report the case. After receiving the report, the police immediately went to Kunyu's factory to investigate. Through the investigation of the factory staff, the police know that on the 26th, the boss was busy at the factory until dawn the next day before driving away. The police thought that it was after work, he might have gone home, so they decided to check the surveillance cameras at Kunyu's residence. As a result, they actually saw his image. The camera showed that at around 3 a.m. on April 27th, Kunyu drove into the underground parking lot. At that time, he was wearing a blue and white striped shirt and had a bag on his shoulder. The next video was recorded from the elevator camera. In the video, Kunyu can be seen yawning and then calmly pressing the button for the 9th floor, where he lives with his girlfriend. The elevator door opened, he walked out, and that was the last image of him recorded by the camera. After that moment, no other camera in the building could see his image. After determining that Kunyu had exited the elevator on the 9th floor, the police quickly arrived at the apartment where he lived with his girlfriend. They searched everywhere but found no trace of him. In an effort to find out the reason, the police talked to Jean Gwen, Kunyu's girlfriend, to see if there had been any recent conflicts between the two that caused him to leave. When asked, Jean Gwen appeared to be in great pain. Tears fell as she confided to the police that Kunyu was the person she loved the most, and that she had not been able to eat or sleep in the past few days, only tossing and turning, worrying about her lover's safety. When the police asked about the day Kunyu went missing, and whether he had shown any unusual behavior, Jingwen said that he had only said that he was going to meet a client at the hotel that night. At first, she did not think much of it, guessing that he had probably drunk too much and stayed overnight before going straight to the factory. It was only when she received a call from his father that she was shocked to realize that no one had been able to contact Kunyu. Jingwen also revealed that Kunyu had bipolar disorder, and she was afraid that he might have done something stupid because he could not handle the pressure of work. With this information, the police went down to the underground parking lot to search Kunyu's car and investigate the surrounding area. Throughout this process, Jean Gwen followed closely. She was so tired that she fell asleep on a nearby motorbike while the police were working. Judging by her exhausted appearance, it could be seen that she had not had a full night's sleep in the past few days. Although the police repeatedly advised her to go home and rest, Jean Gwen insisted on staying. She said she needed to know all the news about Kunyu as soon as possible. After hours of meticulous searching, the police still did not find any significant clues. Kunyu's car was still sitting in the parking lot, not moving at all. Since the building had many elevators with different exits, the police checked the cameras of all the elevators, thinking that Kunyu might have used another elevator to go down. But after reviewing all the footage from the past few days, they did not see any image of him leaving the building. This incident left the investigators extremely bewildered. How could someone disappear without a trace? Knowing that Kunyu was a businessman, the police began to expand their investigation to his business and social relationships. The results showed that the company Kunyu founded 2 years ago was developing very well without any disputes or financial difficulties. Emotionally, he and his girlfriend Jingwen had lived together for many years. Jingwen was 11 years older than him. They had a sisterly relationship, and their feelings had always been good. When the investigation into the relationship did not yield any results, the police decided to go back and carefully examine all the surveillance cameras in the building. This time, an unusual video caught their attention. At around 5 p.m., 2 days after Kunyu went missing, the elevator camera captured the image of a suspicious figure. It was a person wearing a red shirt and a helmet, and from the way he moved and looked, the police determined that it was most likely a woman. It is worth noting that this person was dressed unusually. Her entire body was carefully covered with a thick coat, regardless of the weather. While the people around her were wearing short-sleeved shirts to keep cool, this person's outfit became even more prominent and suspicious. What was more special was that this mysterious woman continuously used the elevator for 4 to 5 hours. And each time she appeared, she carried many bags of different sizes. Through monitoring the surveillance camera, the police recorded that this mysterious woman used the elevator 5 times, transporting a total of 11 bags of goods. However, because this person covered her entire body carefully, they could not determine her identity. During the investigation of this period of time, another detail attracted the attention of the police. In addition to the mysterious woman in red, they also discovered another person who frequently moved many bags of goods using the elevator. This person appeared openly, without any concealment, and the bags they carried seemed lighter. It was Jinwen. What was remarkable was that the police noticed a suspicious coincidence. Jinwen and the woman in red were almost identical in height and build. This discovery raised a question for the investigators. Could the mysterious woman in red be Jinwen in disguise? If they were the same person, why did Jinwen constantly change her outfit, sometimes secretly disguised, sometimes appearing in public? If they were not the same person, then who was the mysterious woman in red? Because previous investigations failed to uncover any other suspects or clues, Jinwen suddenly became the focus of police attention. Through investigating her background, the police know that Jinwen is 47 years old this year. Her birth name is Huang Maiha, born in Fujian. Her life has experienced many ups and downs. When she was young, she got married in China and had 2 children, a boy and a girl with her first husband. Her first marriage ended in pain when she discovered her husband was having an affair and decided to divorce. In 1996, fate brought her to know a Taiwanese man 9 years older than her through a marriage brokerage company. The following year, at the age of 30, she got married for the second time and moved to Taiwan to live. But it seemed that happiness had not yet smiled on her. Her second marriage also did not bring the joy she expected. Her husband did not have a stable job, forcing her to struggle to take care of her life. They lived together for nearly 10 years. In April 2006, Jinwen finally received her residence card in Taiwan. In July, she asked for a divorce. Her second husband begged her, but Jinwen was so determined that he finally agreed to the divorce. With her skillful acupressure massage technique, Jinwen quickly found a job at a spa. Thanks to her outstanding skills, she soon became the best technician in the shop. In addition to her professional skills, Jinwen also had a business mind. After many years of accumulating capital, she boldly opened her own spa in Taichung. Inheriting the massage secrets passed down from her family, combined with her skillful communication skills, her shop grew more and more prosperous. Her success in business helped her not only become financially independent, but also have the conditions to invest in rental real estate. It was during this period of development that she met Kunyu, a young man 11 years younger than her. Despite the age gap, Jinwen was still very young and beautiful thanks to her ability to take care of herself. From Kunyu's frequent visits to the spa, they gradually developed feelings for each other and decided to live together. Jinwen had high hopes for this relationship. She often bragged to her friends about her young and handsome boyfriend. In order to integrate into Kunyu's family, she and her boyfriend went to Nantu to visit his parents every week. So in the end, did Kunyu's disappearance have anything to do with Jinwen? When the mysterious woman in red was spotted in the surveillance video, the police tried to trace her whereabouts through the area's security camera system. However, due to the limited number of cameras on the street, they could only track half of the journey before giving up. The last image they recorded was of the woman riding away on a motorbike, carrying 2 large bags of things. Not giving up, the investigators decided to watch the elevator camera footage over and over again, carefully analyzing every little detail. Their patience was rewarded when they caught an important clue in one frame. At the moment the woman in red reached out to press the elevator button, two of her fingers were clearly bandaged. This detail immediately caught their attention because it coincided with Jing Wen's injuries to those same fingers. Looking at the large and small packages in the camera, plus the injuries on Jing Wen's hands, the police had a bad feeling. Could it be that Jing Wen had killed her boyfriend, dismembered him, and disguised him to get rid of the evidence? With these suspicions, the police went to Jingwan and asked her if, on the second day after her boyfriend went missing, she had carried many bags of things into the elevator. What surprised the police was that Jingwan did not deny it, but frankly admitted it. She said that she had indeed taken her luggage by elevator because she was preparing to sell her house at the time. So she used a trash bag to pack her clothes and brought them to the store, intending to stay there for a while. She also said that if she didn't believe it, could go with her to the store to check. The police were half believing and half doubting. They followed her to the massage parlor and indeed found the bags that appeared on the camera, and they did indeed have clothes inside. However, the police still felt that something was wrong. According to statistics, a total of 11 bags appeared on the camera, but only 5 to 6 bags were found at Jingwen's massage parlor. When the police asked Jingwen about this, she seemed upset. She said that some of the bags had been opened, and the items inside had been taken. She also angrily told the police not to slander her indiscriminately. However, the strange thing was that through her gestures and actions, the police could not sense any real sadness and anxiety. The police still believed in their intuition, thinking that Jingwen must have something to do with her boyfriend's disappearance. At this time, the police changed their tactics and started to comfort her with conversation. The police followed Jingwen's story and talked about her feelings for her boyfriend. Jingwen said that she really loved her boyfriend and even borrowed 10 million new Taiwan dollars, about 330,000 US dollars, to help him do business. Then, they turned to talking about having children. At this moment, the police suddenly changed direction and asked, "You love him so much? Is it possible that love at its peak will turn into hatred?" Jingwen, who had just lowered her guard, was shaken by this unexpected question. Seizing the opportunity, the police continued thoughtfully. People can't disappear for no reason. Every step they take leaves traces. Sooner or later, the truth will be revealed. For the first time, Jingwen fell into a state of prolonged silence. In the tense atmosphere, the policeman gently asked, "Do you think he's still alive?" After a moment of silence, Jingwen replied in an icy voice, "Probably dead." With just that short sentence, the solid defense wall that Jingwen had built up all this time completely collapsed. And then, she confessed all her crimes. As mentioned before, after divorcing her second husband, Jingwen opened a massage parlor in Taichung. She and Kunyu met at this massage parlor. At first, their relationship was very good. Jingwen took great care of her boyfriend. When they first met, Kunyu was not the boss, but only a senior technician. Although the income was quite high, it was still very different from Jingwen's massage business. After that, Jingwen encouraged her boyfriend to start a business as a boss. In order to have the capital to start a business, she specially went to Fujian to borrow money from her father, investing $1 million new Taiwan dollars, about $33,000 US dollars, for her boyfriend. She also used her name as a guarantor, borrowing $10 million new Taiwan dollars from the bank. At that time, Kunyu promised her that he would pay her $200,000 new Taiwan dollars, about $6,600 US dollars, in interest every year. But after the factory made a profit, he did not keep his promise and always found excuses to avoid it. However, Jingwen did not pay much attention at first, thinking that they would get married sooner or later anyway. Everyone's money was the same. However, after 6 years of being together, Jingwen discovered that her boyfriend had no intention of marrying her. As time passed, Jingwen's age began to show, making them look more and more incompatible. In addition, after becoming a boss, Kunyu only focused on his career and did not care about marriage. The most important thing was that Jingwen's children from her first marriage in China now had children, which meant she was a grandmother. This made it very difficult for Kunyu's family to accept her. Kunyu told her that the family could not marry her for the time being and asked her to wait. But then, 2 years before the incident, Jingwen found out that she was pregnant. She was extremely happy, thinking that this time they could finally get married properly. But when Kunyu heard the news, not only was he unhappy, he also asked Jingwen to have an abortion. This made Jingwen realize that her boyfriend had absolutely no intention of marrying her, but only wanted to take her body and money. Thinking about this, she felt very angry. Around March and April 2014, the two of them quarreled more often. Kunyu couldn't stand Jingwen's constant urging on him to get married. So he used her job as an excuse, saying that he absolutely could not marry a woman who worked as a masseuse. Jingwen's dream of marriage was shattered once again. She felt that she had sacrificed everything for her boyfriend, taken care of him for years, been his lover, his guarantor, and lent him money for business. But in the end, she had received nothing. In frustration and anger, she made a terrible decision. On the evening of April 26, 2014, Jingwen waited for Kunyu to get off work as usual. It was around 3 a.m. the next morning when he returned home exhausted. In order to catch him off guard, Jingwen asked him if he wanted something to drink, then made him a cup of tea, secretly putting in 10 sleeping pills. After drinking it, due to fatigue and the effects of the medicine, Kunyu quickly fell asleep. At this time, Jingwen took a knife from the kitchen, knelt by the bed, and in a moment of madness swung the knife at her boyfriend's neck. In order to avoid the blood from staining the bedsheets and leaving traces, she had already spread a plastic sheet on the bed. Thus, Kunyu was murdered while she was completely unprepared. After that, Jingwen dragged her boyfriend's body into the bathroom. In order to avoid leaving traces, she placed his upper body in a large plastic basin that she had prepared to let the blood drain out. Because Jingwen's father was a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, she had a certain understanding of the structure of the human body since she was young. In addition, because she worked as a massage therapist, she was very familiar with the joints of the human body. She quickly finished dismembering the body. During this process, because her hands were tired, she had to switch between cutting hands, and as a result, she accidentally cut her finger. After finishing, Jingwen wrapped the body parts in clothes and put them in black garbage bags. Then she transported them down to the parking lot bit by bit. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, she disguised herself in many different ways when transporting the bags down. She knew for sure that the camera would record them, so to mislead the investigation, she did not bring the body every time she went down. There were a few times when the bags were just clothes. She even intentionally left a few bags at the massage parlor to make it look like she was moving house. After transporting the body to the parking lot, she drove her motorbike to transfer the bags one by one to a car that was parked in a hidden spot from the camera. Then she drove the body parts up a nearby mountain to dispose of them. To completely destroy the evidence, she poured gasoline on the body and the bloody clothes and bedding and burned them, then quickly left the scene. After finishing everything, in a state of panic and the fact that she had just known to drive, she crashed into an electric pole on the side of the road. That night, she did not dare to go home, but stayed at a hotel and hid the murder weapon used to dismember the body in a corner of the room. The next day, Jingwen felt uneasy and returned to the scene to check the situation. The result was that most of the body was still there. Therefore, she dug a shallow hole nearby, buried the remaining parts of the body, and covered it with weeds and branches. After she finished her statement, Jingwen led the police to the scene where the body was dumped. Following her instructions, the police found the burial site covered with branches. When they dug it up, they really found the remaining parts of Kunyu's body. In addition, the police also went to the hotel where she stayed that night and found the murder weapon. At first, the police thought Jingwen's motive for the crime was very clear. It was a murder for love. But through further investigation, they discovered that the emotional issue was only part of it. The other motive was a financial dispute. The police discovered that the house they were living in had a deposit paid by Jingwen, and the monthly installments were paid by Kunyu. When Jingwen realized that her boyfriend had no intention of getting married, she planned to sell the house and leave Taiwan. But her boyfriend said that since he had also contributed money, he wanted to split the money from the sale of the house. Jingwen felt extremely angry and disappointed when her boyfriend, who had been with her for so many years, not only did not want to marry her, but also wanted to split the money from the sale of the house. In order to prevent the money from being divided, and also to get revenge, she planned this murder. It could be seen that she had been planning this for a long time. Before taking action, she still cared about Kunyu's parents as usual, not showing any unusual signs. The police also discovered that Jingwen's driver's license had only been issued not long before the incident, and no one around her knew about it. The police believed that she had secretly known to drive in preparation for disposing of the evidence. In addition, 2 months before the incident, she had used insomnia as an excuse to get sleeping pills from the hospital. The day before the crime, she bought a knife, a large plastic basin, a plastic sheet, and two 10-liter gasoline cans. She also rented a car the day before and deliberately parked it in a place where the cameras could not see it, preparing for the next day's plan. It is noteworthy that before committing the crime, Jingwen was worried that if she killed someone and then sold the house, once the incident was discovered, the house would become a haunted house and could not be sold. Therefore, she decided to sell the house first. In fact, since March 21st, that is, before the incident occurred, she had already agreed on a price with the buyer and completed the name change procedure on April 14th. However, she planned to hand over the house after completing the plan at the end of the month. As a result, this case caused the house to become a haunted house after being transferred for a few days. Because the evidence of the case was very complete, everyone initially thought it would end quickly. But unexpectedly, during the trial, Jingwen suddenly changed her testimony. She claimed that it was self-defense that night, because Kunyu had used a knife to slash her first. So she fought back and she only slashed once. However, according to the prosecution's evidence, Kunyu had taken sleeping pills when she was murdered. Later, Jingwen changed her testimony, saying that she acted rashly and had no premeditated murder plan. However, a lot of evidence, such as buying the car in advance, buying the knife, and the plastic sheet, all proved that she had been well prepared. Finally, she even claimed that she was mentally disordered, possessed by a ghost, and had no control over her actions when she committed the crime. However, the psychiatric examination results showed that she was completely normal. Because Jingwen's attitude in court was very arrogant and showed no intention of repenting, she was initially facing the death penalty. However, before the sentencing, her attitude suddenly changed. She began copying scriptures in prison, and wrote 5 letters of repentance to the judge and the victim's family. In the letter, she specifically expressed her wish to be filial to her boyfriend's parents, hoping that they could forgive her impulsive act out of emotion, and promised to pay double the amount they demanded in compensation. The judge determined that Jingwen was not an irredeemable sinner. It was only because she could not effectively resolve her emotional conflicts, debts, and pregnancy that she ended up in this tragedy. The judge believed that she still had the potential to reform, so she was eventually sentenced to life in prison. When this case was first announced, public opinion generally sympathized with Jingwen. At that time, everyone thought that she was a victim who had been taken advantage of and abandoned by a young man, causing her to lose both her life and her property. And only when she could not force her to marry did she take extreme action. However, through in-depth investigation, the truth shows that murder for love is only part of the case. Financial dispute is her main motive. Moreover, this case was planned very carefully. This fact makes the public sympathy for her decrease significantly. Finally, the biggest controversy is about the verdict. Many people suspect that Jingwen copied scriptures and wrote letters of repentance just to gain mercy. Story 2. October 2023, Wang Xikong, the heir of the renowned Wanda Group in China, made headlines when the media reported his official breakup with a famous social media influencer. Shortly after, Wang Xikong's ex-girlfriend, Wang Yiming, publicly revealed that she had an illegitimate daughter with him. This revelation dominated search rankings for several months. Meanwhile, a Weibo post by a lawyer, buried among countless entertainment news stories, also drew significant attention. In the post, the lawyer disclosed the brother-in-law of a billionaire was arrested for committing a homicide and is under supervised custody at a designated location. Here, the former billionaire referred to Wang Jianlin, the head of the Wanda Group and the social media celebrity's uncle, pointed to Wang Xikong. The arrested individual, Lin Yu, is a well-known billionaire in China who owns several multinational companies. As of the end of 2023, news of Lin Yu's arrest had not gained much public traction. However, an international media report about Chinese police being called to assist in investigating a 20-year-old murder case in Sweden caused a stir. Soon after, the phrase, Lin Yu, Wang Xikong's uncle, suspected of murdering 2 wives, became a trending topic across major media platforms. People began to realize that this powerful billionaire was implicated in several severe criminal cases. How had he managed to evade the law for over 15 years? Let's go back to the morning of March 18, 2003, in an ordinary family home in the Hugsbo district, southwest of Gothenburg, the second largest city in Sweden. After breakfast, a woman named Veronica Lin, then 30 years old, took her 3-year-old son, Marcus, to daycare before heading to the campus of Chalmers University of Technology, one of Sweden's most prestigious universities. At the time, she was a student there. Born in 1973, Veronica was the second child in her family, and had an older sister named Christina. From a young age, Veronica had a strong passion for East Asian culture. She had worked at a few Chinese restaurants in Gothenburg. In 1996, at the age of 23, she traveled to Dalian, China, to study, learning Chinese while teaching English part-time. During this period, she met Lin Yu, a man 10 years her senior, who was also a student in her English class. Over time, the two developed a romantic relationship. Before Christmas 1997, Veronica, still in Dalian, sent a letter home to her family, sharing that she had fallen in love with a charismatic and influential man in Dalian. It seemed that Veronica was more deeply invested in the relationship than Lin Yu. In 1998, after finishing her studies abroad, Veronica returned to Gothenburg and soon discovered she was pregnant. She shared the news with Lin Yu, who was initially very surprised, but decided to take responsibility. Later during police interrogations, Lin Yu stated, according to Chinese customs, having a child without being married is not acceptable. For Veronica, the child, and myself, I immediately went to Gothenburg. Veronica's family arranged a wedding registration at the city hall. Some reports described their relationship as a romantic cross-border love story. However, in reality, Lin Yu was known to be quite a philanderer, and without the pregnancy, he likely would never have married Veronica. Lin Yu later remarked, "At first I really liked Veronica, but over time, I noticed her flaws. Veronica was very emotional and impulsive. We had discussed marriage before, but never made a final decision." Despite this, the couple enjoyed a brief period of happiness after their wedding. Every time Lin Yu returned to Sweden, he brought gifts for Veronica's parents, ranging from exquisite Chinese porcelain to elegant leather jackets. However, the long periods of separation gradually eroded their relationship. When their son Marcus was born in June 1999, Lin Yu was not even present. Afterward, Veronica moved back to her parents' home with Marcus. Living with her parents, Veronica led a simple life. In the mornings, she would take Marcus to daycare, then attend her classes, and return home afterward to care for her parents and son. She usually got home around 3 or 4 p.m. Lin Yu sent about 10,000 Swedish krona, approximately $900 monthly to support Veronica and Marcus. However, over time, he became increasingly reluctant and often delayed the payments. By December 2002, Veronica requested a divorce and Lin Yu agreed, acknowledging that their marriage had become nominal and was being maintained only for their child. However, neither of them was willing to compromise when it came to custody of Marcus. In the spring of 2003, shortly before the incident, Lin Yu sent Veronica an email with a threatening tone. "Don't push me. I love Marcus more than you do. I will come to Sweden to talk things through with you." Veronica responded, "If you want to fight, go ahead." On March 18, 2003, Veronica failed to return home by the evening. Her parents went to pick up Marcus from daycare and repeatedly called her phone. Although her phone was on, no one answered. By 9 p.m., Veronica's parents reported her missing to the police, providing the following information. Veronica was 30 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, with shoulder-length dark brown hair. She was last seen wearing a leather jacket and a shirt. By the morning of March 19th, Veronica was still missing, leaving her parents extremely worried. During police interviews, Veronica's mother mentioned that the previous evening, she had heard several screams in the hallway. However, when she tried to follow the sound to investigate, the screaming had stopped. Fortunately, Veronica's phone was still active and could be connected. The police began using technical methods to locate the phone. On the evening of March 19th, the police traced the signal from Veronica's phone and discovered it was within the apartment complex where her family lived. However, due to the limitations of technology at the time, they couldn't pinpoint the exact unit. The police resorted to calling her phone and listening at the doors of each apartment to determine where the sound was coming from. Eventually, they found Veronica's phone in the first-floor apartment of a man named Tang Zhong. The police knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. Forced to break in, they were horrified by what they saw. Veronica lay collapsed in the hallway leading to the bedroom, surrounded by dark red stains. Signs of a struggle were evident on her body, and she was no longer breathing. It seemed the screams Veronica's mother had heard the previous evening were her final cries. Tang Zhong, the apartment's owner, had disappeared without a trace. However, his passport was found in the apartment, and the police released an image of it as evidence. Initially, investigators strongly suspected Tang Zhong of murdering Veronica, especially after they tracked his phone signal moving quickly toward the Swedish-Danish border. This further supported the theory that Tang Zhong was fleeing to evade justice. However, when the police followed his phone signal, they discovered it had been discarded in a trash can near the train station. Veronica's family lived on the second floor of the same building, while Tang Zhong lived on the first floor. As his name suggests, Tang Zhong was of Chinese descent. Reports indicated that his Swedish language skills were poor, whereas Veronica was fluent in both Swedish and Chinese. Occasionally, Tang Zhong had asked Veronica to help translate official letters from the local government. Veronica's parents described Tang Zhong as a seemingly gentle person who never had conflicts with neighbors, making it difficult to imagine what could have motivated him to commit such a heinous act. When asked if Veronica had conflicts with anyone else, her parents immediately mentioned her estranged husband, Lin Yu. They explained that the couple was in the midst of a contentious divorce and had been fiercely arguing over custody of their son. Additionally, Lin Yu, a wealthy businessman from China, would likely face the prospect of giving Veronica a significant portion of his assets if the divorce was finalized, something he was unwilling to accept. Furthermore, Lin was using his marriage to Veronica to apply for residency in Sweden. Veronica's decision to file for divorce at this time would have greatly displeased him. Hearing this, the police began investigating Lin's travel records and discovered that he was currently in Gothenburg, Sweden, staying at the Sheraton Hotel in the city. Even more surprising was that Veronica's parents had no idea Lin had come to Sweden. In the past, Lin would stay at their home when visiting. This time, however, he had secretly checked into the Sheraton Hotel. Could there be a specific reason for this unusual behavior? The police quickly arrested Lin Yu at the Sheraton Hotel. During the interrogation, Lin Yu expressed anger, stating that the suspicions against him were deeply upsetting. He claimed he had never anticipated such an incident, and that Veronica's death caused him immense grief. Lin Yu explained that he had not informed his in-laws about his trip to Sweden because he was traveling in Europe for business. Originally, Sweden was not part of his itinerary, but due to an urgent deal, he decided to visit Gothenburg. Since his stay was brief, he didn't want to inconvenience his in-laws. More importantly, Lin Yu had an alibi. Veronica's time of death was estimated to be around 3:30 p.m. on March 18th, while Lin Yu was reportedly with business partners the entire day until late at night. His defense attorney highlighted this point and argued that, given Lin Yu's alibi, the suspicions surrounding Tang Zhong, who was on the run, seemed far more compelling. After a month of investigations and multiple hearings, Swedish prosecutors concluded that there was insufficient evidence to charge Lin Yu, and he was released. On April 25, 2003, Lin Yu boarded a flight back to China, making any further attempts to detain him significantly more challenging. Since Veronica's death, the police had been unable to locate Tang Zhong. The company he worked for reported that he had been absent without notice since March 18th, and no one had been able to contact him. A breakthrough occurred on April 30th, when a woman walking her dog near Veronica's family's apartment complex noticed her dog refusing to leave a patch of grass behind the building. The dog barked incessantly at a particular spot where the ground appeared disturbed. This area was directly below the window of Tang Zhong's apartment. Aware of the murder that had taken place in the building, the woman quickly contacted the police. Upon arrival, officers dug beneath the grass and uncovered Tang Zhong's decomposing body. It turned out that he had not fled to evade justice, but had himself fallen victim to foul play. More crucially, the autopsy revealed that Tang Zhong had died on March 17th, one day before Veronica's murder. This meant he could not have been her killer. The police then re-examined Tang Zhong's apartment, the scene of Veronica's murder, and conducted forensic testing. The results showed that the red stains at the crime scene contained DNA from 3 individuals: Veronica, Tang Zhong, and an unidentified male. With suspicions about Tang Zhong eliminated, the police resumed their investigation into Lin Yu. They returned to the Sheraton Hotel in Gothenburg, where Lin Yu had stayed and conducted forensic testing in his room. The results revealed that the unidentified male DNA found at the murder scene also matched DNA collected in Lin Yu's hotel room. Years later, with the assistance of Chinese authorities, Swedish police identified the suspect. He was 37 years old at the time and named Zhong Song. Based on the available evidence, Swedish investigators theorized that Lin Yu may have hired Zhong Song as a hitman to deal with his troublesome wife, Veronica. Killing Veronica at Chalmers University of Technology was clearly impractical, and abducting her on the way home would have attracted attention. The most feasible location for the crime was the apartment building where Veronica lived. In other words, Tang Zhong's death may have occurred because the perpetrator needed a location to kill Veronica. Tang Zhong was murdered on March 17th, and the killer dismembered him, burying the remains under the grass behind the apartment complex under the cover of darkness. The killer then used Tang Zhong's apartment as a hideout. The following day, when Veronica returned home, the perpetrator abducted her in the hallway and brought her to Tang Zhong's apartment. After killing Veronica, the perpetrator took Tang Zhong's passport and phoned to fabricate the appearance of Tang fleeing to avoid responsibility for the crime, thereby framing him. As for why Zhong Song's DNA was found in Lin Yu's hotel room, it was likely because Zhong Song met with Lin Yu at the hotel to report the completion of his task. While staying at the hotel, Zhong Song may have been bleeding from an injury, inadvertently leaving traces of his DNA behind. On June 7, 2005, Swedish authorities issued an international warrant for Lin Yu, initiating a nearly decade-long pursuit. However, with no extradition treaty between Sweden and China, combined with the influence of the Lin and Wang families in China, bringing Lin Yu back to Sweden was nearly impossible. Most people might assume Lin Yu's most significant claim to fame was being the brother-in-law of billionaire Wang Jianlin, once the richest man in China and Asia. However, Lin Yu's true power came not from Wang Jianlin, but from his father, Lin Lianzong, and his sister, Lin Yusong. Yusong was married to Wang Jinlin, and was also the mother of Wang Xiezong. Though she maintained a low profile, she was far from a mere noblewoman leading an unremarkable life within a wealthy family. Yusong and Lin Yu's father, Lin Lianzong, was a prominent figure in the military. Moreover, Lin Lianzong was not a rags-to-riches soldier who climbed the ranks through perseverance. Instead, he was born into immense wealth. Lin Lianzong's father, Yusong and Lin Yu's grandfather, was a well-known merchant in Linjiazhuang, Longyao County, Xingtai City, Hebei Province, China. By the time Lin Lianzong was born, his family was already one of the most influential forces in Linjiazhuang. The grandfather initially intended for Lin Lianzong to study business and manage the family's assets, but Lin Lianzong was determined to pursue a military career. Later, Yusong inherited her grandfather's business acumen. In 1994, she founded Lincher Investment Group, a conglomerate with interests in construction, food services, and entertainment. In March 2014, Yusong joined the board of directors of the Wanda Group. Rumors circulated on Chinese social media that when Wanda faced a debt crisis in 2017, Yusong contributed 200 billion yuan to rescue the company. In 2005, after Swedish police issued an international warrant for Lin Yu, they initiated procedures to travel to Dalian, China, to gather additional evidence. During this trip, Swedish authorities met with Lin Yu's personal assistant. Lin Ling had been responsible for booking Lin Yu's flight to Sweden and organizing his itinerary during his stay there. Swedish police suspected that Lin Ling might know the real purpose behind Lin Yu's trip to Sweden. They urged her to share any relevant information, and warned her that her situation could become dangerous. However, Lin Ling appeared indifferent to their warnings and was unwilling to cooperate with the investigation. Years later, Lin Ling became Lin Yu's second wife, unaware that she was walking into the doorway of death. In February 2014, a user named Uncle Bluebeard posted an article titled, "Even the Wealthy Face Risks." My sister died on Koh Samui Island, Thailand on the Tien Na forum, which quickly gained widespread attention. Although the original post was deleted, screenshots of it remain available online. The author described how her sister-in-law's younger sister was incredibly beautiful and had been married to one of China's wealthiest men for over 15 years. The post alleged that the sister was strangled to death by her husband abroad and thrown into a swimming pool to stage it as a drowning accident. The husband was reportedly arrested by foreign police and later paid a large sum to be released on bail. The article referred to the husband as L and claimed that he controlled all of his wife's finances. The sister-in-law had once bought an apartment for her parents, registered in her name. However, after her death, Elle allegedly changed the locks on the apartment, leaving her parents with nowhere to go. Although the article did not explicitly name anyone, internet users, displaying a Sherlock Holmes-like knack for investigation, unearthed a 2013 Thai media report. The report revealed that a Chinese woman named Lin Ling had drowned at a villa on Koh Samui Island, Thailand. Lin Ling's family expressed suspicions about her death, believing that she had been murdered by her Lin Yu. According to related reports, Lin Yu and Lin Ling had traveled to their private villa on Koh Samui Island for a vacation in January 2013. On the morning of January 18th, Lin Yu frantically sought out the villa's management, claiming that his wife had drowned in the swimming pool the previous night. He explained that he had gone to bed early and discovered her floating in the pool when he woke up in the morning. The villa staff alerted the local police, who arrived to find Lin Yu holding his wife's cold body by the pool. It was later determined that Lin Ling had been dead for at least 8 to 10 hours before her body was discovered. What raised suspicion was the discovery of scratches on Lin Yu's left shoulder, which appeared to be fresh nail marks, suggesting he had been involved in a struggle. Additionally, Lin Yu waited until January 20th, to 2 days after the incident. Call Lin Ling's parents in China and inform them of their daughter's sudden death. During the autopsy, the forensic doctor discovered clear bruising on Lin Ling's neck caused by forceful strangulation, confirming that she had been murdered. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation due to pressure on the neck. The crime scene was a private villa at the estate Samui on Koh Samui Island. A 2011 article revealed that Lin Yu had purchased this villa in 2008 during a trip to Thailand. In 2013, a Chinese-language newspaper in Thailand, Jinhua Zhongyuan, reported on Lin Ling's case. However, due to the significant influence of the Lin and Wang families at the time, all names in the articles were replaced with pseudonyms. Lin Ling was referred to as Julie, and her sister, the writer of the Weibo post mentioned earlier, was also anonymized. Later, Lin Ling's brother-in-law publicly shared more details about the events online. He explained that Lin Ling had been extremely close to her parents, and as the youngest child, she had been cherished by them from a young age. No matter where she went, Lin Ling would call or message her parents daily. However, starting on January 18th, Lin Ling's parents could no longer reach her. It wasn't until January 20th that they received a call from Lin Yu. Lin Ling, who didn't know how to swim, would never have gone swimming alone in the middle of the night. Their villa on Koh Samui was an ultra-luxurious 4-star resort. Lin Ling's parents had visited the property many times, as had her sister's family. The resort featured strict security measures, making it highly unlikely for an accidental drowning to occur, especially in the family's private pool. Lin Yu claimed that on the night of January 17th, after drinking heavily, he had fallen asleep, only to find Lin Ling drowned in the morning. He added that Lin Ling rarely drank, but she may have had a little that evening. Despite the many doubts surrounding the case, Lin Ling's parents initially chose to believe their son-in-law and began arranging for Lin Ling's body to be transported back to China. On January 22nd, the Liaoning Provincial Police Bureau contacted Lin Ling's father to inquire if the family was aware of her accident in Thailand. When they confirmed they were aware, the police advised them that preserving Lin Ling's body was crucial for any future investigation. Thai police had preliminarily classified the case as a deliberate homicide. At this point, Lin Ling's parents were utterly shocked. They immediately traveled to Thailand to review the forensic report. For years after Lin Ling's death, they tirelessly sought justice for their daughter. Initially, under pressure from Lin Ling's parents, Thai authorities arrested Lin Yu. A special investigation committee was established to handle the case. However, it appears that Lin Yu used his financial influence to disrupt the investigation, which was subsequently halted by an official suspension order. Lin Ling's family refused to give up and continued to file lawsuits with the Koh Samui court, which accepted their case. The court issued an arrest warrant for Lin Yu, but after paying a substantial bail, Lin Yu was released. He was supposed to remain in the country while out on bail, but for reasons unclear, Lin Yu managed to return to China. In November 2014, Lin Yu entered the United Kingdom using a passport under his own name. The UK's facial recognition system flagged him as an internationally wanted fugitive. The United Kingdom, having an extradition treaty with Sweden, promptly arrested Lin Yu and extradited him to Gothenburg, Sweden. In January 2016, Swedish prosecutors charged Lin Yu with 2 counts of incitement to commit murder. Although there was evidence that Lin Yu was not present at the scene when Veronica was killed, the prosecution argued that he had hired someone to murder both Veronica and Tang Zhong. During the trial, Lin Yu argued that he had never met Tang Zhong, did not know he lived on the first floor of Veronica's apartment building, and could not have ordered any actions involving him. However, Veronica's father testified that Lin Yu had met Tang Zhong several times while staying at their home in Sweden. Another Chinese individual, who had previously lived with Tang Zhong, also confirmed that Lin Yu had interacted with both of them. After multiple hearings and testimonies from over 40 witnesses, the jury unanimously concluded that Lin Yu had orchestrated Veronica's murder, with the most compelling evidence being Zhang Song's DNA found in the hotel room where Lin Yu stayed. Lin Yu was sentenced to life imprisonment, as Sweden does not have the death penalty, the harshest punishment available under Swedish law. However, the jury also determined that there was insufficient evidence to prove Lin Yu had orchestrated Tang Zhong's murder. They speculated that Tang Zhong's death might not have been part of Lin Yu's plan. Following the life sentence, Lin Yu's legal team was left stunned. He had spent a significant sum of money hiring 3 defense lawyers, who worked tirelessly to find a way to appeal the decision. Soon, they found an opportunity. The lawyers discovered that a jury member had previously posted extreme anti-Chinese statements on Twitter, suggesting potential bias. According to legal regulations, this rendered the verdict invalid. The case was remanded to a lower court for a retrial with a new judge and jury. What happened next was unexpected. With the same evidence and documentation, the new jury concluded that there was insufficient evidence linking Lin Yu to Veronica's murder. He was declared not guilty. The court reasoned that the DNA evidence only established a connection between Lin Yu and Zhang Song, who was present in the apartment where the murder occurred, but did not prove Lin Yu had hired Zhang Song to kill his wife. Furthermore, there was not enough evidence to confirm Zhang Song himself was the perpetrator. In response to the verdict, both the Swedish prosecution and Lin Yu filed appeals. The prosecution sought to continue holding Lin Yu criminally accountable, while Lin Yu's reason for appealing surprised many. Upon being declared not guilty, the court awarded him 4.1 million Swedish krona to cover his legal expenses. However, Lin Yu argued that this amount was insufficient. He claimed that his legal team had hired investigators and translated investigative documents into Chinese, raising the total cost of legal and investigative fees to at least 7.5 million Swedish krona. Despite these appeals, no further action was taken, as Lin Yu swiftly returned to China. After his return in May and September 2017, Lin Yu established 2 companies, Zhenshigu Investment Corporation in Shenzhen and Tengshiga Biotechnology Company in Dalian. These companies focused on biosciences and pharmaceuticals. In 2018, the Zhenshiga Cell Bank was inaugurated, along with the Zhenshiga Life Sciences Industrial Park in Dalian. Reports indicated that Zhenshiga's ambitious goal was to create a personal cell bank for every citizen in China. In an interview, Lin Yu stated that he adhered to the business philosophy of Anamori Kizuo, which emphasizes reverence for nature and compassion for people, valuing ethics and love for humanity. Watching the interview video, it would be hard to imagine that Lin Yu had been implicated in multiple serious criminal cases. Beyond cell storage, Zhenshiga focused on innovative cell science research. At the 2018 Dalian International Life Sciences Conference, Lin Yu delivered a speech and presented a video of his daughter. He revealed that his daughter had been born with a genetic defect. On her 4th birthday the previous year, she was still unable to walk. However, thanks to Zhenshiga's products, she was now healthy and active. By this timeline, Lin Yu's daughter was born around 2013, shortly after the death of his second wife, Lin Ling. This strongly suggests that Lin Yu quickly married a 3rd wife, which led many to revisit and scrutinize his past. In Veronica's case, a key figure was Zhang Song, who had been linked to both the crime scene and Lin Yu's hotel room. It was believed that finding Zhang Song could provide crucial leads. However, in October 2015, Swedish police inquired with Chinese authorities about Zhang Song's whereabouts, only to be told that he had been missing for years. In 2021, Sweden's SVT television network aired a 6-part documentary titled Veronica and the Chinese Millionaire, which detailed the case and trial, sparking widespread discussion in Sweden. The documentary featured interviews with Lin Yu's son, Marcus, as well as Veronica's father, sister, and close friends. After Veronica's death, Marcus lived with his maternal grandparents and never saw his father, Lin Yu, or his paternal grandparents in China again. Initially, his grandparents told him that his parents had died in a car accident. However, when he was 7 years old, Marcus stumbled upon a videotape at home and saw news reports suggesting his father, might have been involved in his mother's death. The truth was devastating for him. Fortunately, his grandparents raised him well. In the documentary, Marcus revealed that he had once tried to contact his father. He wrote a letter to Lin Yu through a Chinese journalist, sending it to the headquarters of Xinxiu. In the letter, Marcus wrote, "Dear Father, this is not an easy letter to write. I am your son, but we have not seen each other for a very long time. About you, I have only a few childhood memories. Over the years, I've heard many things about you from others, like how you are kind, generous, and talented. But I've also heard disturbing stories about terrible actions attributed to you. I hope to form my own understanding of you. I want to know what happened between you and my mother. What do you think of me? As your son, do you still have any fatherly love for me, or am I just someone you don't want to acknowledge?" Despite sending the letter, Marcus did not receive a response. It's possible that Lin Yu never saw the letter due to some misunderstanding, or perhaps he wasn't ready to confront Marcus. In August 2024, Sweden's SVT television reported that Lin Yu had been arrested in China on suspicion of murder. However, Chinese authorities have not yet released further details about his arrest. After more than 20 years as a fugitive, Lin Yu's sudden capture raises questions. Does this signal the unveiling of more hidden secrets, or the downfall of a once powerful figure? We can only wait for official reports. According to Hong Kong News, many legal experts believe that Lin Yu's arrest in China after 21 years suggests he is likely to face trial there. The chances of extradition to Sweden are considered very low. The trial will face several challenges, including the legality of evidence, the defendant's right to a fair defense, and the complexities of international legal cooperation. Under Chinese law, if the evidence is conclusive, Lin Yu could be sentenced to life imprisonment or even the death penalty, depending on the severity of the crime. If the evidence is insufficient, he could be acquitted and released. This brings today's case to an end. This case reminds us that no matter how much time has passed or how difficult a case may seem, the dignity of the law and the pursuit of justice must never be compromised. Story 3. This case took place in a residential area on Xintai Road in the Xinjiang district of New Taipei City, Taiwan. On April 17, 2008, a high school student named Pingue returned home from school as usual. As soon as she stepped inside, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Her mother wasn't there to greet her as usual, and the house was eerily quiet. Pingue began to feel uneasy. She called out for her mother several times, but received no response. She walked to her mother's room and gently pushed open the door. What she saw was a horrifying scene that would likely haunt her forever. Her mother was bound hand and foot with tape, lying face down naked on the bed, with blood stains all over the mattress. Fighting back her fear and grief, Pingue shakily called the police. Upon receiving the report, police and emergency personnel quickly arrived at the scene. After an initial examination, they confirmed that Pingue's mother had been brutally murdered. There was a deep wound on her neck, clearly indicating death by throat cutting. The police immediately secured the crime scene and began a thorough investigation. At the scene, they discovered a fruit knife and scissors suspected to be the murder weapons. The room showed signs of being searched. Police initially believed this might be a robbery-murder case. They theorized that a thief had broken in when no one was home, unexpectedly encountering the homeowner returning early. When confronted with the sudden appearance of the homeowner, the thief might have panicked and committed the brutal murder. Additionally, given the victim's naked state, police suspected she might have been sexually assaulted before death. However, specific details would have to wait for the forensic report. The victim Yikafoni was 46 years old and had previously run a coffee wholesale business with her husband. Their marriage had been harmonious, but tragically, her husband had died of a heart attack 3 years earlier. For Kafoni, this was a devastating blow. After her husband's death, she lost her support system, and the coffee business had to cease operations. Fortunately, thanks to savings from their previous business, Kafong was able to maintain a living and raise her 2 daughters alone. At the time of the incident, her older daughter was studying at university in Jiai, while her younger daughter Pingwu lived with her. The forensic report soon arrived. It revealed that the victim had 23 knife wounds from her chin to neck, with the fatal wound being a 2.4-inch deep cut that caused severe bleeding. The victim ultimately died from excessive blood loss and respiratory failure. Additionally, forensics discovered a curved mark on Kuei-Fong's left cheek, suggesting this was a fingernail mark left when the killer pressed their hand against her face. There was also minor bleeding under her scalp, indicating her head had been struck. Notably, semen was found in the victim's body. Police initially thought this was a robbery homicide, but further investigation made this scenario unlikely. First, there were no signs of forced entry on the windows or doors of the victim's home. Second, the family dog hadn't barked at the time of the incident, suggesting the killer was someone familiar to the victim. While the scene showed signs of being searched, the mobile phone and loose cash on the table weren't taken. Most importantly, the residential area where the victim lived had strict security measures. The complex had a large iron gate, but for convenience, only a side gate was used for resident access. Additionally, security guards were on duty 24/7, and all visitors had to register. These circumstances made police suspect the crime was likely committed by someone the victim knew. Therefore, police immediately went to the security office to check the visitor log and surveillance footage from that day. Indeed, through the surveillance cameras, they spotted a suspicious man. The footage showed that at 1:51 p.m. that day, a man wearing a black shirt and baseball cap, head down while on his phone, had taken advantage of the security guard's momentary inattention to slip into the complex with other residents. 2 minutes later, this man entered the elevator and quickly turned to press the button for the 6th floor, the floor where Tsui iPhone lived. Unfortunately, because he was wearing a cap, the cameras couldn't capture his face. At 5:29 p.m., the man left the complex carrying a white plastic bag. This timing coincided with when Itsuefeng was murdered. Police immediately made this person their primary suspect. To further identify the suspect, police called in the victim's daughter Pinghua to review the surveillance footage. Surprisingly, as soon as she saw the images, Pinghua immediately recognized the man as Uncle Jishan, someone they knew well. Pinghua revealed to police that they had been neighbors with Uncle Jishan, and since her father's death, he had frequently visited her mother, and shown great concern for both her and her sister. Based on Pinghue's description, police quickly identified the suspect. The suspect was Lin Jishan, 45 years old, married with 2 children. His main business was in mainland China, so he frequently traveled between Taiwan and China. Initially, police worried he might have already left Taiwan, but after checking immigration records, they discovered he was still in the country. Therefore, the police's primary task was to quickly locate Jishan. Initially, police thought they could quickly determine Jishan's location through phone tracking, but Jishan seemed well versed in police surveillance techniques. His phone would turn on and off intermittently, making it difficult to pinpoint his location. Even when Jishan's phone occasionally turned on, it appeared to be deliberately misleading police tracking efforts. In fact, after the murder, Jishan had been continuously hiding in various locations around Taipei. After the incident, Jishan's phone signal first appeared in the Sanchong area. Police immediately investigated, but by the time they arrived, the signal had moved to Jinshan at Jishan's house. Police rushed to Jishan's home in Jinshan, but were again too late, as Jishan had already fled. At Jishan's house, police found blood-stained clothes he had changed out of. At this point, police were certain Jishan was the murderer. When questioning Jishan's wife, police received an important lead. During his escape, Jishan had sent a lengthy text message to his wife explaining the incident. In the message to his wife, Jishan admitted to having an affair with Kafong, the victim. He claimed that Kafong had been pressuring him to divorce his wife and frequently sent him inappropriate videos. He wanted to end the relationship, but she refused. In the message, he mentioned that the day before the incident, when he returned to Taiwan from China, he had tried to end things peacefully with Kafong but couldn't convince her. Instead, Kafong threatened him to come to her house at 11 a.m. the next day, or there would be consequences. Jishan said that when their negotiation failed again the next afternoon, Kafong threatened to never let his family live in peace. In a moment of lost control, Jishan punched her. Then Kafong suddenly clutched her chest, painfully saying she was having a heart attack and asking Jishan to get her medicine. But Jishan thought Kafong was just acting to gain sympathy, so he took no action. However, the situation suddenly deteriorated when Kafong unexpectedly collapsed on the floor, motionless. Jishan quickly checked, but found Kafong had stopped breathing. At that moment, he realized Kafong might have actually died from heart disease. However, because the residential complex had surveillance cameras everywhere, he knew Kuefeng's death would definitely be linked to him. So he devised a plan to stage the scene as a robbery murder. He first used tape to bind Kuefeng's hands and feet, then took a knife and cut her throat. Because the knife was dull, it only caused some small wounds. But then he discovered Kafoni wasn't dead and had awakened from the pain of the knife wounds. After waking up, Kafoni began screaming loudly, so in panic, Jishan stabbed her multiple times. After reading Jishan's message to his wife, police weren't entirely convinced of its truthfulness. The urgent task remained finding Jishan. Because his phone signal kept changing locations, police were constantly being led around. To ensure Jishan's phone stayed on, so they could accurately determine his location, police employed a strategy of having the victim's daughter Pingo send him messages in a gentle tone. Surprisingly, Jishan responded to Pingo's messages. He replied, "It's too late now to apologize to Kafoni and her children. I will pay with my life. Give me a few days. No need to wait for legal punishment. I will pay with my life." But then his tone changed. "That day your mother said you had grown up and were very good, ranking in the top 15 of your school. I hope you two sisters will support each other. Don't let your mother down. I have nothing more to say." Pingo was very angry when she saw such a response. She didn't understand what Jishan meant. He was a murderer, yet was advising the sisters to support each other. Was he trying to comfort them? However, to encourage Jishan to surrender voluntarily, Pingo suppressed her anger and continued messaging him. "Uncle, you need to give us an explanation. You can't just kill someone, and then tell us to support each other and think that's enough. That doesn't help. We're all waiting for your explanation. Please, can you appear quickly? Tomorrow is Mother's funeral. I want to resolve this quickly so Mother can rest in peace." Jishan then sent Pingo a message explaining what had happened. In the message to Pingo he wrote, "I'm truly sorry. I really didn't mean to. At that time, I should have been calmer, should have gone to save your mother. What I'm telling you now is all true. I have no reason to lie to you. Last year, around May or June, I gave your mother 600,000 new Taiwan dollars, approximately 20,000 US dollars, to invest in a fund. Recently, because I was facing some financial difficulties, I asked your mother to sell the fund so I could use the capital. She agreed. I came back to Taiwan on Wednesday, and when I went to your house, your mother told me she had sold the fund a few days before and received the money. When I came to your house the next day, your mother suddenly said the money was gone and threw her bank book at me to see. In anger, I punched her in the back. Then she screamed about having a heart attack and asked me to get medicine, but I thought she was just pretending, so I didn't pay attention." The subsequent description of events by Jishan basically matched what he had told his wife earlier. The main difference between his explanations to his wife and Pingua was the motive for the crime. In his explanation to Pingua, the reason was that Chifeng had spent the money he urgently needed, causing him to angrily strike her. But in the message to his wife, he said it was because Chifeng had been pursuing him and pressuring him to divorce, causing him to lose control and punch her. Police currently found it difficult to judge the truthfulness of these two messages. However, in both messages, Jishan mentioned that he had returned to Taiwan from China the day before the incident, April 16th. Police then extracted surveillance footage from April 16th and discovered that Jishan had indeed returned from China that day and gone straight to the victim's home. However, on the way, Jishan had stopped at a supermarket and bought a roll of tape before going to Chifeng's house. Shockingly, this roll of tape matched exactly with the tape used to bind the victim. This important discovery led police to suspect that Jishan's actions were not a momentary loss of control, but had been premeditated, completely contradicting what he had described in his previous messages. At this point, the detective in charge of the case directly messaged Jishan, urging him to surrender, mentioning that cooperating with police now might give him a chance for a reduced sentence. However, Jishan arrogantly replied that he worked in telecommunications and the police couldn't easily catch him. He even boastfully declared that in a few days he would openly board a plane and leave the country. Actually, through these message exchanges, police had detected that Jishan's phone signal frequently appeared in the Jiaoqi area of Ilan. Police quickly went to Ilan and upon arrival, split into multiple teams. One team investigated hotels in Ilan, while others maintained 24-hour surveillance at train stations and major intersections in Jiaoxi to prevent the suspect from escaping. However, after several days, the police search in Ilan showed no progress. Just as police were beginning to doubt whether Jishan was still in Jiaoxi, the case had an important breakthrough. That day, police spotted a man buying cigarettes in a convenience store whose appearance closely matched suspect Jishan. Police approached to inquire and asked the man for identification. The man insisted he wasn't Jishan but rather Jishan's brother and produced his driver's license. Police carefully examined the ID the man provided. The more they looked, the more they felt the photo on it didn't match the man before them. Instead, the man's appearance was very similar to the suspect Jishan they were seeking. However, unable to completely confirm the man's identity, police hadn't taken any forceful measures. At this point, the man requested to use the bathroom. Since they hadn't confirmed his identity, police couldn't let him leave like that, so they assigned 2 officers to accompany him to a nearby store to use their bathroom. On the way to the bathroom, the man suddenly stopped, saying he had something important to report directly to the team leader. The team leader was in a police car nearby. After the man was brought to the car, the team leader directly asked, "You are Jishan, aren't you?" At this point, the man no longer tried to hide and directly admitted yes. Subsequently, Jishan was taken by police to the hotel where he was staying for a search. At the hotel, police found the victim Chui Feng's identification documents, bank book, and bank cards. Knowing he could no longer escape, Jishan revealed the whole truth about his complicated relationship with Chui Feng. It turned out that Jishan and Yi Chui Feng had known each other many years before. At that time, Jishan was serving in the military in Kinmen, while Chu Feng was working at an ice cream shop. Because of her beauty, she was admired by many soldiers stationed there. Among them was Jishan, who had pursued Chu Feng passionately and confessed his feelings multiple times, but was always rejected. Later, Jishan completed his military service, and they lost contact. As time passed, they both married and had their own families. However, after all those years, Jishan's feelings for Chui Feng had never faded. Surprisingly, Jishan learned through inquiries that Chui Feng had bought a small villa by the beach in Jinshan. Actually, Chui Feng and her family normally lived in Xinzhuang District, New Taipei City, where the murder occurred. The villa in Jinshan was really just a place for Chui Feng and her family to rest during holidays. To get close to the woman he had secretly loved for years, Jishan bought a villa opposite Chui Feng's house, living near his dream woman. His purpose was to create accidental encounters. In 2003, Jishan moved into his new house in Jinshan with a calculated plan. Day after day, he patiently waited for seemingly chance encounters with Chui Feng. Fate seemed to smile on Jishan's schemes when Chui Feng couldn't hide her surprise and emotion at meeting an old acquaintance after so many years, now become her neighbor. From casual social conversations, they gradually became closer. Jishan, though married, deliberately kept this secret and once again devoted himself to pursuing the woman who had rejected him in the past. At that time, happiness was still smiling on Chui Feng's small family. Her marital relationship was still as beautiful as in the early days, so she firmly rejected all of Jishan's romantic advances. But then fate turned cruel when in 2005, Chui Feng's husband suddenly passed away from a heart attack. The pain of losing her life partner shattered her spirit, and the following days were immersed in grief and loneliness. The seaside villa in Jinshan, once witness to her small family's happy moments, now only held sad memories. Jishan saw an opportunity in Chui Feng's pain. He understood this was when she was at her most vulnerable and lonely, and with the sophistication of a predator, Jishan gradually worked his way into Chui Feng's broken heart. However, Jishan always hid from Chui Feng that he was married. To his wife, he lied that he needed to work in China. Since Jishan frequently did business in China, his wife was used to this and didn't ask many questions. Subsequently, Jishan and Chui Feng began a passionate affair. Jishan often stayed overnight at Chui Feng's home, and Chui Feng's daughters also knew Jishan, affectionately calling him Uncle Jishan. During their relationship, because Jishan's business wasn't going well and frequently suffered losses, he continuously borrowed money from Chui Feng to cover capital shortfalls. However, when the company was profitable, he did once give Chui Feng 600,000 new Taiwan dollars, approximately $20,000, to invest in a fund. But such situations were rare. Most often he was borrowing money from Chui Feng. As time passed, due to Jishan's constant demands for money from Chui Feng, their relationship began to show cracks. During one argument, Jishan accidentally revealed that he was married. Chui Feng couldn't accept becoming the other woman, and decided to end the relationship with Jishan, demanding he repay the money he had borrowed previously. However, Chui Feng never received any money back from Jishan. Meanwhile, Jishan didn't want to break up with Chui Feng. To escape Jishan's harassment, Chui Feng stopped answering any of his calls or messages. Unexpectedly, Jishan directly returned from China to Taiwan, went to Chui Feng's residential complex, and stood below her floor, sending threatening messages. Either let me come up, or I'll go find your daughter. You choose. If you don't see your daughter for a few days, that's my doing. Faced with such threats, Chufeng was forced to give in and let Jishan up. In the end, they didn't successfully break up, but reconciled instead. However, Chufeng set one condition. Jishan had to divorce his wife. She believed this was the only way they could have a long-term future together. Although Jishan outwardly agreed to this demand, he took no actual steps to follow through. Later, because Jishan's business in China needed a large amount of capital, he asked Chui Feng to sell the 600,000 new Taiwan dollar investment fund to resolve his company's urgent financial difficulties. Chui Feng agreed at the time. On the afternoon of April 16, 2008, one day before the murder, Jishan specifically returned to Taiwan from China with the purpose of reclaiming the 600,000 new Taiwan dollars from Chui Feng. That day, he first stopped at a supermarket to buy tape, then went to Chui Feng's residential complex. Jishan explained to police that he bought the tape because Chui Feng had special preferences, and the tape was just to add excitement. That evening, they used the tape at Chui Feng's home. After finishing, Jishan brought up the money issue, and Chui Feng said they would discuss it the next day. The next day, the day of the murder, around 1 p.m., Jishan came to Chui Feng's home. They had intimate relations again. Afterward, when Jishan brought up the money again, Chui Feng suddenly said the money was all spent. Upon hearing this, Jishan lost control and had a violent argument with Chui Feng. What happened afterward matched what Jishan had described in his messages to his wife and Pinghua. He thought Chui Feng had died from a heart condition, so he deliberately staged the scene to look like a robbery murder. However, during the initial trial, Jishan suddenly changed his previous testimony. In court, Jishan said that Chui Feng had actually committed suicide. He claimed that day while arguing with Chu Feng, she suddenly lost emotional control, ran to the kitchen and grabbed a fruit knife and scissors. Then, in an extremely agitated state, Chu Feng used the scissors to stab her own neck. Jishan said he had rushed to press his hand against the wound, but Chu Feng gradually lost her breath and heartbeat. Jishan said he was very frightened then, knowing that Chu Feng's death in his presence would not only implicate him in the case, but would also leave her 2 daughters without support. Therefore, he decided to stage the scene as a robbery murder. This way, at least Chui Feng's daughters could receive their mother's insurance money. However, Jishan's latest testimony completely contradicted the forensic report. According to the examination report, the fatal neck wound on Chui Feng was 2.4 inches deep and 1.2 inches wide. Meanwhile, the scissors found at the scene were double-bladed with plastic coating, with a maximum width of only 0.8 inches. Therefore, this fatal wound clearly couldn't have been caused by the scissors. Furthermore, the bleeding under Chui Feng's scalp was consistent with Jishan's earlier testimony about punching her and causing her to fall unconscious. Additionally, the fingernail mark on Chui Feng's cheek led forensics to speculate that this mark could have been made when Jishan pressed her head down as she regained consciousness and struggled while he was cutting her throat. Based on this collective evidence, the judge didn't believe testimony, but rather believed Jishan's earlier confession, that he had knocked Chufeng unconscious with his fist, then bound her with tape and killed her. The judge also pointed out that the defendant and Chufeng were lovers at the time. If the defendant had no intention to kill, when Chufeng regained consciousness, he should have immediately untied her and taken her to the hospital. That would have been a normal human reaction. Moreover, regarding the defendant's defense that he did this so Chufeng's 2 daughters could receive insurance money, the judge said, "How could someone willingly bear the serious crime of murder for 2 people unrelated to him? After committing such a serious crime, the defendant should have shown remorse, apologized to the victim, begged for forgiveness, and accepted legal punishment." However, the defendant instead tried to fabricate a story about insurance money to rationalize his actions. Such a defense was clearly unreasonable and also showed he had no intention of repenting. Finally, the judge sentenced Lin Jishan to life imprisonment. Jishan was dissatisfied with the sentence and appealed, but the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. Story 4. Keep it simple and follow your heart. This is a beautiful line from her social media profile. She was a young, beautiful, and optimistic international student who had just graduated from the University of Technology, Sydney. She had secured her dream job and was brimming with hope for the future. However, It seemed that fate had played a cruel trick on her. Just as her life was about to open a new chapter, a silent nightmare descended and she vanished from this world without a trace. Today, we will uncover the tragic case of a Chinese international student who was murdered in Australia. This case shocked the entire Chinese community in Australia, leaving everyone heartbroken, who ultimately took the vibrant life of this young woman. To find out, let us turn back time to 2016 and examine the details of the case. Australia is an enormous country, yet its population is just under 27 million. For this reason, Australia is very welcoming to immigrants. For many years, Australia has attracted immigrants from all over the world, including a large number of international students. Many Chinese students choose Australia as their study destination. The story we discuss today took place in New South Wales, home to the city of Sydney. The protagonist of this story is Michelle Lang, who came from Sichuan, China. With her outstanding academic performance, she studied at the University of Technology, Sydney, and had just graduated. Michelle was born in 1991 in Chengdu, Sichuan, as the only child in a loving family. Her parents cherished her dearly, and the three lived in harmony. Michelle had an outgoing and cheerful personality, and she was always well liked by her friends, often surrounded by a lively group. She excelled academically from a young age and was a favorite among her teachers. In 2008, Michelle was about to finish her final year of high school, preparing for a crucial milestone in her life, the college entrance exams. With her excellent academic record, she had been studying diligently for a long time and felt confident about the exams. However, an unexpected disaster struck: the 2008 Sichuan earthquake. This catastrophic event tore many families apart. Tragically, Michelle's father lost his life in the earthquake. Despite her profound grief, she persevered, focused on her studies, and successfully completed the college entrance exams, gaining admission to Sichuan University, a prestigious institution majoring in broadcasting and television. Michelle's mother was immensely proud of her daughter, who had become her sole hope for the future. Throughout her university years, Michelle continued to study hard and excel. She also aspired to study abroad. At first, her mother was hesitant about the idea. After all, there were just the two of them left, and moving overseas would mean seeing each other even less often. Yet, she ultimately decided to support her daughter's dream. They chose Australia as the destination for Michelle's studies. One of the reasons for selecting Australia was that Michelle's aunt was already living there. In the eyes of many families in China, having a relative in a foreign country provides some comfort and support, especially for a young woman navigating life in an unfamiliar place. In 2011, Michelle left her mother to study abroad in Australia. She enrolled in the Hospitality Management program at the University of Technology, Sydney, and lived with her aunt. The house was located in Campsie, New South Wales, just over 6 miles from downtown Sydney. The area had numerous Chinese supermarkets and restaurants, offering great convenience for everyday life, with easy access to work and school in Sydney. Here, let's briefly introduce her aunt's family. Michelle's aunt, Zhongfeng, did not live alone. She was married to Derek Barrett, who was just 2 years older than Michelle and had 2 children from a previous marriage. They had only recently gotten married, and Michelle had even attended their wedding, contributing to the ceremony's expenses. So the 5 of them lived together harmoniously under one roof. Despite living in a foreign country, Michelle's optimistic personality helped her quickly adapt to life in Australia, and she developed strong friendships. Over the following years, Michelle excelled in her studies and achieved outstanding academic results. She frequently shared joyful moments on social media, posting photos of food and happy memories, which showed how much she enjoyed her life there. Time flew by, and in 2015, graduated from the University of Technology, Sydney. She wanted to work in Australia for a few years before planning her next steps. She had discussed this decision with her mother while she was still a student. To support Michelle's future, her mother sold a house and borrowed additional money from relatives to purchase a property in April 2014. The house, located in Campsie, was valued at $700,000 AUD. Of course, they had only paid the down payment at that time. To live together and provide mutual care, Michelle's aunt and her family of 4 moved into the new house as well. Michelle quickly secured a job as an assistant for an IELTS instructor. Everything seemed to be going well, and Michelle felt hopeful about her future. However, on April 22, 2016, something unexpected happened. A few of Michelle Lang's friends were unable to reach her. She wasn't answering phone calls or responding to messages, which was completely out of character. Michelle's aunt also tried to contact her, but had no success. At the time, her aunt was working in Wollongong, about 25 miles away, which required a 1-hour train ride. Although a bit worried, her aunt assumed that Michelle might have gone with friends to the Blue Mountains to see the autumn foliage, as it was a public holiday in Australia. Given the poor cell phone signal in that area, no one thought too much of it at first. It wasn't until 10:40 a.m. on April 24th, 2 days later, that a tourist near the mouth of Snapper Point in Central Coast, Newcastle, spotted something floating in the water that resembled a human body and alerted the police. After receiving the report, the police immediately arrived at the scene and retrieved the body from the water. It was identified as the body of a young woman wrapped in a plastic bag, estimated to be between 20 and 30 years old with black hair. The victim had dozens of stab wounds, with fatal injuries to her neck. There were also signs that her wrists and ankles had been bound with rope. The estimated time of death was around 48 hours prior. Initial assessments indicated that this was a deliberate murder, with the perpetrator intentionally dumping the body at this location. No evidence of contact with rocks was found on the body, leading authorities to believe that this was not the primary crime scene. Unfortunately, due to prolonged submersion in water, many critical clues were destroyed and no fingerprints or other evidence of the perpetrator could be recovered. Additionally, the victim's face was severely damaged, making it impossible to determine her identity. To solve the case quickly, the police used computer software to reconstruct the victim's facial features and release the image, hoping the public would come forward with any information. On the afternoon of April 25th, Michelle's aunt and uncle reported to the police that their niece had been missing for 3 days and asked for help locating her. The police suspected that the victim found the previous day might be Michelle. However, because the victim's face was severely disfigured and she was found unclothed with no clear identifying marks, identification was difficult. The police decided to compare DNA samples. They collected Michelle's personal items, such as a toothbrush, hairbrush, and other belongings. On April 26th, while the initial DNA results were still pending, the search for Michelle intensified. Many of her classmates and friends began posting about her disappearance online, especially the friend who had seen her on the afternoon of April 21st. The Chinese community in Australia was also deeply shaken, and widespread concern grew for Michelle's safety. After several agonizing days of waiting, at 8 a.m. on April 29th, the police finally announced the DNA comparison results. The victim found at Central Coast was indeed Michelle, the young woman everyone had been desperately searching for. Upon hearing the news, Michelle's mother collapsed in grief. Having already endured the loss of her husband, she now faced the devastating reality of losing her beloved daughter who had just stepped into adulthood. The question remained on everyone's mind who could commit such a cruel act. Michelle had always lived harmoniously with her aunt's family, and there had never been any reported conflicts. Thus, at first, her relatives were not considered suspicious. Michelle's aunt told police that on April 21st, Michelle had been out all day, and everything seemed normal when she returned home that afternoon. Her last known contact with the outside world was at midnight on April 21st during a conversation with her IELTS teacher. After that, she completely lost contact, leading police to believe she was likely murdered on April 22nd. Could it be that someone had followed her during the day on April 21st, leading to her tragic death? The police decided to reconstruct Michelle's movements. Through extensive surveillance camera footage, they were able to retrace her steps on April 21st. First, Michelle went to her university and met with some classmates. At 3 p.m., she was seen shopping on Pitt Street in Sydney's Central Business District. After shopping, she took the subway from Central Station to Camp C. Arriving home at approximately 4:40 p.m., surveillance footage showed Michelle looking completely normal while shopping and riding the train, with no sign of anyone following her. There appeared to be no opportunity for her to encounter a stranger who might harm her. Surveillance footage further revealed that after Michelle returned home on the afternoon of April 21st, there was no record of her leaving the house again. Coincidentally, from April 21st to April 22nd, Michelle's uncle was the only other person in the house. Michelle's aunt was working in Wollongong and did not return home until the evening of April 24th, and her 2 children were also away. This analysis raised significant suspicion against someone who had previously been overlooked, Michelle's uncle. Given this, the police arrested Derek Barrett, charging him with murder and obtaining a search warrant to investigate further. Barrett, whose full name is Derek Barrett, was born in 1989 in a small town called Guandolin on the Central Coast. Not much is known about his early life, but after graduation, he worked in IT for a tech company. It is unclear why he developed feelings for Michelle's aunt, who was nearly 20 years older than him. Shortly after they married, he lost his job. For the next 5 years, Barrett stayed home, unemployed, living a routine of sleeping during the day and playing video games at night. Although his family repeatedly urged him to find a job, warning that he would otherwise become useless, he always responded with, "I've applied for jobs, but I never hear back." Despite his unemployment and laziness, Barrett had a calm and polite demeanor. He was respectful to all 4 members of the household, including Michelle, and there were never any conflicts. Because of this, the family lived in harmony. Could such a seemingly mild-mannered man really be the one who murdered Michelle? Barrett's wife and 2 children could not believe it. They refused to accept that the man they had lived with for 5 years could commit such a crime. The family firmly believed that the police had arrested the wrong person. But was this really the case? As the investigation deepened, more incriminating evidence against Barrett began to surface. 2 tourists informed the police that they had seen Barrett at Snapper Point on the Central Coast. At the time, he told them not to approach the cliffs, claiming it was dangerous. Looking back, it seemed he was afraid they would discover the body he had just dumped. Surveillance footage also captured Barrett driving into the national park near Snapper Point early on the morning of April 24th. On his way there, he stopped at a gas station to buy a drink, and the store's security cameras recorded him. He appeared completely calm at the time. Police also recovered 19 nude photos of Michelle on Barrett's phone. These were taken after he had bound her wrists and ankles and gagged her with duct tape, forcing her to pose for the pictures. Although Barrett had deleted the photos, police technicians successfully restored them. Further evidence was found on his computer. It turned out Barrett had been secretly recording Michelle for a long time. He had hidden a camera behind the bathroom mirror to film Michelle while she showered and used the toilet. Shockingly, he did not even spare his wife. Barrett had also filmed her in secret. In addition, he would sneak into the bedrooms of Michelle and his wife while they were fast asleep and masturbate in front of them. All of these acts were recorded, revealing Barrett to be a depraved individual. Combining evidence, witness statements, and various leads, police pieced together the entire sequence of Barrett's crime. Barrett had developed a twisted obsession with Michelle Lang, his wife's niece. All of the politeness he displayed to the family had been a facade. Barrett had been waiting for an opportunity to assault her. That opportunity came on April 21st, when his wife left for work for 3 days and his children were occupied elsewhere. That afternoon, Michelle returned home in good spirits, completely unaware of the monster lying in wait. That night, she made calls to her aunt and her ILTS teacher. After hanging up, Barrett, who had already prepared his plan, snuck into her room. Although Michelle fought back fiercely, she was no match for Barrett's strength. In the end, was overpowered, tied up, and subjected to a brutal assault. On April 22nd, Barrett continued his depraved actions. However, he did not expect that at 3 p.m., his wife would unexpectedly return home and stay for 3 hours. During this time, Barrett locked himself in the bathroom, leaving the shower running continuously. At one point, he quickly ran to the kitchen to retrieve something, and then rushed back to the bathroom. He seemed very nervous about anyone, particularly his daughter, entering the bathroom. When his daughter later asked for shampoo to wash her hair, Barrett only cracked the door open slightly, handed her the shampoo, and told her to use another bathroom. At that moment, Michelle was likely still in the bathroom, perhaps even still alive. Tragically, his wife had no idea that something horrific was happening inside her own home. Police believe that if Barrett's wife had discovered his brutal actions at that time, she might have been killed as well. Over the next 2 days, only Barrett and Michelle were in the house. For reasons unknown, Barrett stabbed Michelle more than 40 times, with the most severe wounds to her neck. After committing the heinous crime, Barrett began planning how to dispose of the evidence. He decided on the cliffs at Snapper Point on the Central Coast, not far from his parents' home. The area's rugged terrain and powerful ocean waves made it the ideal location for hiding a body. On the morning of April 24th, Barrett wrapped Michelle's body in a plastic bag, placed it in the trunk of his car, and drove 62 miles, 100 kilometers, to Snapper Point. On the way, he stopped to refuel and bought a drink at a gas station, where security cameras recorded him appearing completely calm. After disposing of the body, Barrett deliberately visited his parents' house, just a few miles from Snapper Point. This visit was likely an attempt to establish an alibi in case police traced his movements to Snapper Point. That evening, Barrett drove to pick up his wife, pretending as if nothing had happened. He even mentioned that Michelle had not yet returned home. On April 25th, following Michelle's aunt's request, the couple went to the police station to report her missing. The rest of the story is now well known. The police's deduction was logical, and all evidence pointed to Barrett as the perpetrator. He had lived under the same roof with Michelle for 5 years, hiding his true nature. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Barrett continued to deny his crimes. Upon hearing the devastating news about her daughter, Michelle's mother immediately flew to Sydney. At a press conference, she broke down in tears saying, "To this day, I still cannot accept the fact that my beloved daughter is gone. The pain is so overwhelming that I can hardly breathe." Learning that the killer was Barrett left her even more shocked and speechless. Her relationship with her sister had been strong, and she would never have allowed Michelle to live with them otherwise. She firmly believed that her sister knew nothing about Barrett's actions, as everyone had been deceived by his cunning and deceitful facade. Michelle's aunt was consumed with guilt and regret, blaming herself for not recognizing her husband's true nature sooner. On May 4th, 2016, the trial for Michelle's murder began. For the first time, Michelle's mother, relatives, and friends attended the courtroom. However, Barrett did not appear in court that day. His lawyer stated that Barrett maintained his innocence, claiming he was being framed, and that he intended to apply for bail to be released. On June 29th, the case was brought back to the local court. In addition to the murder charge, Barrett faced 27 other charges, including unlawful imprisonment, sexual assault, and filming others' private parts without their consent. The prosecution informed Michelle Lang's mother that this was only a preliminary hearing in the early stages of the trial, and that her attendance was not necessary. However, despite not having fully recovered her health, she traveled once again from Chengdu to Sydney. She said, "Even if I have to sell our only house and lose everything, I will make sure the perpetrator is brought to justice." Due to additional evidence, the trial was postponed to August 10th and then delayed again. During this time, Barrett attempted to evade responsibility by pretending to have a mental illness. However, after a medical evaluation, it was determined that he was not mentally ill. Perhaps realizing that escaping conviction was unlikely, Barrett did not apply for bail throughout the proceedings. On August 16, 2017, the case resumed at the local court. This time, Barrett did not appear in person, but attended via video link. He voluntarily pleaded guilty to 5 of the 28 charges, including murder and unlawful imprisonment. However, he insisted, "I don't remember what happened. I just suddenly found myself staring at a sink full of blood." He claimed, "I must have overdosed on drugs and eaten excessively, which caused me to lose control of my actions." It was clear that this statement was an attempt to mitigate his punishment. On December 13, 2017, the New South Wales Supreme Court held the sentencing hearing for Michelle's case. Barrett appeared in court and admitted to breaking into Michelle's room in the early hours of April 22nd. Despite her resistance, he tied her to the bed, took photos of her, stabbed her over 40 times, hid her body in the house for 2 days, and then disposed of it. He expressed what appeared to be remorse, saying, "My actions betrayed 2 families. She was such a beautiful girl. I feel ashamed of what I did. I am here to tell the truth and offer a small contribution, whether they accept it or not." However, throughout the hearing, Barrett kept his head down, shielding his eyes with a tissue. Police believe that his behavior demonstrated insincerity. During the proceedings, Barrett again emphasized that he could not clearly recall what had happened that day. He claimed there had been an argument, followed by his discovery of blood in the sink. He stated, "I don't know. I think about what happened and why I did it every single day. It makes me deeply sad." For his memory loss, he continued to blame a large intake of drugs and excessive eating before the crime. He claimed the drugs controlled him and that he had no knowledge of his actions. Naturally, the police rejected his explanation. Forensic psychology experts testified that methamphetamine typically does not cause memory loss, particularly at the dosage Barrett claimed to have taken. Furthermore, the nature of the crime clearly showed premeditation. From the act of murder to the disposal of the body, Barrett acted with purpose, following a coherent and logical plan. Surveillance footage showing Barrett calmly stopping to refuel his car and purchase a drink demonstrated his clear state of mind and composure during the incident. Experts also concluded that all evidence indicated Barrett was a sexual sadist with an extraordinarily high risk of reoffending 10 to 100 times higher than the average person, making him extremely dangerous. They stated that prison was the safest place for him. In the end, Barrett was convicted of 22 charges, including 19 counts of recording intimate images without consent and 2 counts of possessing pornographic materials. 2 days later, New South Wales Supreme Court Justice Helen Wilson, based on the evidence presented by the prosecution, stated that Barrett's actions were an extraordinarily cruel, depraved, and cowardly crime. She further dismissed his claims of being controlled by drugs and suffering memory loss as completely fabricated. During the trial, Barrett occasionally shed tears, but they appeared insincere, more like a performance of remorse. Overall, he was a cold-blooded individual. After thorough deliberation, Barrett was sentenced to 46 years in prison with no parole eligibility for 34 years and 6 months. Following the sentencing, Michelle's grief-stricken mother broke down in tears in court. She knew that Australia does not have the death penalty, so her greatest hope was for Barrett to be imprisoned for life. While the final outcome did not fully meet her expectations, she had no other choice. The lengthy trial had taken a severe toll on her, physically and emotionally, as she made countless trips between Sydney and Chengdu while enduring immense exhaustion. More heartbreaking than anything were her tearful words. "My Michelle is gone, and my life has completely fallen apart. There is no way to make up for this." With the final verdict announced, the case that had shocked both China and Australia finally came to a close. The perpetrator was punished, but the pain of Michelle's tragic death remained. As Detective Gary Giblin told the media outside the courthouse, while the investigation and trial delivered justice, this entire case remains a tragedy. Indeed, Michelle had worked so hard to gain admission to university, to study abroad, and to build a successful life. Yet her beautiful future, just beginning, was suddenly and cruelly ended. As time passed and Barrett remained behind bars, the tragedy slowly faded from public memory. However, no one could have predicted that a USB drive would reignite the case and thrust it back into the media spotlight. 3 years after the crime, in November 2019, an elderly woman living in Chatswood, just 3.7 miles from the house where Michelle was murdered, somehow came into possession of a USB drive. The woman had been suffering from Alzheimer's disease for years, rarely leaving her wheelchair or home. When her daughter visited and discovered the USB drive, she was shocked and had no idea where her mother could have obtained it. Out of curiosity, she plugged the USB into her computer. What she saw left her horrified and scarred for life. She immediately contacted the police and handed over the USB. The police were equally appalled by the depravity it contained. The USB held 9 video clips totaling approximately 60 minutes and 13 horrifying photographs. All of the content depicted Barrett's sadistic abuse and violation of Michelle from multiple angles. He treated Michelle not as a human being, but as a lifeless object, mercilessly beating and assaulting her. One particular video included Michelle's desperate plea. "You're insane. What are you doing? You can't treat me this way." From her tear-streaked face and anguished expression, it was clear that she experienced unimaginable fear and pain, but was powerless to escape. In the end, she succumbed to the devil's hands. After viewing the contents of the USB, the police immediately filed new charges against Barrett. Thousands of miles away, Michelle's mother received the devastating news, which caused her to collapse once again. Over the years, she had lived with the pain of losing her daughter, but no one could have imagined that an even greater agony was still to come. Michelle's mother said, "No mother in this world could accept such horrifying news. My Michelle was such a kind-hearted, thoughtful, filial, and upright child. Hearing what she endured, I feel as though my heart has been shattered into pieces." During this time, Barrett wrote an apology letter to Michelle's mother from prison, but the letter was filled with empty, insincere words. Michelle's mother rejected his apology. What was even more infuriating was that during his appeal process, Barrett continued to insist that he had been controlled by drugs. He even told a prison guard that he and Michelle were in a consensual romantic relationship, implying that she had willingly participated. It was clear that Barrett showed no real remorse or accountability for his actions. Supreme Court Justice Helen Wilson stated that had she known about the existence of the USB at the time of sentencing, she would have handed down a life sentence without parole. Unfortunately, double jeopardy laws prevented her from doing so now. However, based on the contents of the USB, the police brought 9 additional charges against Barrett, leading to an additional 25 years in prison. This new sentence, however, was ordered to run concurrently with his existing 46-year sentence. This meant that Barrett's total sentence duration remained unchanged, but his non-parole period was extended from 34 years to 36 years and 6 months. As a result, he will not be eligible for parole until October 27, 2052. Story 5 at 1:30 p.m. on August 29th, the day before the incident, Li Hua and her husband, Zhuang Wenhui, called their parents to say they would visit. Wenhui's father answered the phone and, like any parent, was overjoyed to hear that his son and daughter-in-law were coming over. 3 hours later, at 4:30 p.m., when Wenhui and Li Hua arrived, they found the iron gate locked from the inside. Despite repeatedly ringing the doorbell, there was no response. Wenhui began to feel uneasy. Just 3 hours ago, his father had cheerfully answered the phone. So why was the house suddenly empty? At that moment, he noticed a note on the door that read, "As the parents will be emigrating to Argentina the day after tomorrow. They needed to go south today to bid farewell to relatives and friends. We apologize for any inconvenience. Signed, Yan Hui." To understand the characters mentioned in this note and learn more about the case, let's look at the family background. The father mentioned in the note was Zhuang Shidu, age 68. He and his wife, Mrs. Kai, had 3 children. Their eldest son, who had already settled in Argentina, their daughter, Zhuang Yueqing, married to Qin Yanhui, who left the note, and their youngest son, Zhuang Wenhui, married to Li Lihua, who stopped the police car. The Zhuang family was a wealthy merchant family. In their early years, Mr. and Mrs. Zhuang started with a small barber shop in Taipei, carefully saving their earnings. Later, they boldly invested in real estate around Hejiang Street. Fortune smiled upon them as this coincided with Taipei's urban expansion, causing the value of Mr. Zhuang's property investments to skyrocket within just a few years. By seizing this opportunity, the couple had built considerable wealth. Of their 3 children, the eldest son had chosen to settle in Argentina early on. Following his lead, their daughter and her husband, Yan Hui, also established themselves in that distant country. Only the youngest son, Wen Hui, and his wife remained in Taiwan to care for his parents. Mr. and Mrs. Zhuang lived at 131 Hejiang Street, which would later become the crime scene. By August 1986, Mr. and Mrs. Zhuang had also decided to emigrate to Argentina to reunite with their children and enjoy their retirement. Their son-in-law, Yan Hui, made a special trip back from Argentina to help them with immigration procedures and accompany them on their journey. Learning that their parents would soon leave Taiwan for Argentina, Wenhui and his wife wanted to visit and help with the packing. Around 4 p.m. on August 29th, they arrived at 131 Hejiang Street, but were surprised to find the main door locked from inside. There was a note on the door, and oddly enough, while the handwriting was indeed Yunhui's, it stated that the parents had gone to South Taiwan to bid farewell to friends. This made Wenhui extremely suspicious. How could his parents suddenly leave when just 3 hours ago his father had been happily talking on the phone? His parents hadn't mentioned any plans to go south, and had even cheerfully said they would wait for the couple to come over for afternoon tea. His mother had specifically asked Li Hua to take the longer route through Shirlin to buy her favorite pork knuckles and steamed buns, so why would she suddenly change her plans? After waiting at the door for quite a while, the couple decided to find a nearby restaurant to rest. During this time, Wenhui couldn't settle his mind and kept calling home, hoping his parents had returned. Finally, at 10:30 p.m., someone answered the phone, but instead of his parents' familiar voices, it was his brother-in-law Yan Hui on the line. He hastily said only, "The parents haven't returned yet," before hanging up abruptly. The brother-in-law's strange behavior made the couple even more uneasy. They hurriedly discussed returning to the house to check if anything was wrong. When they arrived back at the house, Wen Hui rang the doorbell again. After a while, his brother-in-law appeared inappropriately dressed in just a white tank top and shorts. With visible irritation, he snapped, "Why are you coming at this hour? I already told you the parents aren't home." The couple quickly explained they just wanted to see if they could help with anything. They went upstairs, and Yin Hui didn't stop them from entering. In the living room, he sat down on the sofa, putting his feet up on the chair. Wenhui immediately sensed something was wrong. His brother-in-law's complexion was unusual, his eyes were bloodshot, and he looked exhausted. More disturbing was the smell of blood in the room, and there were sticky stains on the furniture that looked like dried blood. Unable to contain himself, Wenhui asked, "What's that up there?" Without even looking, Inhui immediately replied, "Just mosquito stains." Wenhui continued asking about his parents' whereabouts. "Did they really go south this afternoon? Why didn't they say anything beforehand?" Inhui replied indifferently, "It was a last-minute decision. They specifically told me you would visit this afternoon, which is why I left the note." Then suddenly, as if unable to contain himself any longer, Inhui abruptly changed the subject and began complaining about his in-laws. The parents are so biased, always favoring the eldest son. Honestly, among all their sons and sons-in-law, who hasn't treated them well, why don't we get any share of the assets? The eldest son already has plenty of money. The youngest son, Wenhui, was startled by this, but fortunately reacted quickly, going along with his brother-in-law's words. "Actually, I have issues with this too. Sure, they can go to Argentina, but why not leave me anything? What good is this old house to me? My business hasn't been doing well lately, and I've wanted to borrow money from them, but couldn't even bring myself to ask. I sometimes wonder if they're going to Argentina just to avoid me." After Wenhui's comments, his brother-in-law became visibly excited, as if he'd found an ally. He continued, "I'm practically their son too, yet they guard against me like I'm a thief. You're their actual son. But what good has it done you? They'd rather run off to Argentina than live with you." The two men continued talking animatedly in the living room. But Wenhui knew very well in his heart, his parents weren't that kind of people. He was only playing along to avoid arousing his brother-in-law's suspicions. In fact, from the moment he entered the house, Wenhui had noticed things were off. His parents' sudden departure without notice, the locked door since afternoon, blood stains on furniture, the lingering metallic smell that wouldn't dissipate, plus his brother-in-law's strange demeanor. All these signs told his instincts that something terrible had happened to his parents. Though terrified inside, Wenhui maintained a calm exterior, smiling and chatting with his brother-in-law as if everything was normal. He knew he absolutely couldn't risk making his brother-in-law suspicious. While the two men were engaged in conversation, Wenhui's wife Lihua excused herself to use the bathroom. What she saw there horrified her. Blood stains remained in the tile grout. Though someone had clearly tried to clean up, they couldn't erase all traces of evidence. Moreover, her in-law's bedroom door was tightly locked, and the smell of blood grew stronger near the door. At this point, Lihua was certain that a murder had taken place in the house, and her in-laws had likely met a tragic fate. Though heartbroken, Lihua forced herself not to cry. She understood that if she confronted her brother-in-law now, both she and her husband could be in mortal danger. She wiped away her tears, composed herself, and returned to the living room. Over the next hour, she secretly traced letters on her husband's thigh with her finger to communicate. Fortunately, the couple knew each other well enough that Wenhui understood his suspicions were correct. Something terrible had happened to his parents. During this time, brother-in-law Inhui repeatedly suggested, "It's so hot today, why don't you two take a shower?" By now the couple understood. He might be trying to separate them to make them vulnerable. So they both politely declined, and insisted on staying in the living room to chat. The three of them continued like this for over 4 hours until 4 a.m. the next morning. The brother-in-law had smoked nearly half a pack of cigarettes. At this point, Lihua suddenly stood up, pretending everything was normal, and said, "You shouldn't smoke so much, let me clean up this mess. Look at all these cigarettes, but scattered around." She then started tidying up. Soon after, she took a carefully tied garbage bag and walked toward the stairs, saying she was going down to throw out the trash. Lihua chose this moment because she knew garbage collectors would come around 4 a.m., and she had planned to ask either them or any passers-by to help call the police. By coincidence, when she reached the street corner, she saw a garbage truck slowly approaching. But what she hadn't expected was that there was a police patrol car following behind the garbage truck. Lihua immediately dropped the garbage bag and ran to stop the police car. After the police got out of their car, Lihua told them everything she had discovered. The three officers immediately followed her to 131 Hajiang Street and quickly went up to the second floor. In the living room, Yunhui faced the police without showing any sign of panic, remaining calmly seated on the sofa. However, based on their professional instincts, the three officers immediately noticed an unusual metallic smell in the house. Two officers began checking the upper and lower floors for anything suspicious, while the third officer stayed in the living room to watch Yanhui. Meanwhile, Wenhui and Lihua went to his parents' master bedroom door. Wenhui kicked the door hard several times, but it wouldn't budge. With no other choice, he helped his wife climb through the small window into the room. Soon after, Lihua managed to open the door from inside. When they entered the master bedroom, they found 6 pieces of luggage. Wenhui's heart was pounding as he slowly unzipped one of the bags and saw blood-soaked body parts. The emotions he had been suppressing suddenly erupted, and he screamed in horror. Murder! This heart-wrenching scream caught the attention of all 3 officers. They rushed over, urging Wenhui not to disturb the crime scene. But then a problem arose. All 3 officers were now in the bedroom, so who was watching the brother-in-law in the living room? When 2 officers suddenly remembered this and rushed back to the living room, the sofa was empty. Indeed, the suspect had escaped right under their noses. The police headquarters quickly received the report. A large number of officers were dispatched to secure the crime scene. Crime scene investigators, prosecutors, and forensic experts arrived one after another. As they opened the bags one by one, they discovered the killer had methodically sorted the victim's body parts. 2 heads in one bag, 4 hands in another bag, feet and internal organs sorted into different bags. Besides the 6 pieces of luggage, they found an array of weapons in the master bedroom, including a half-moon-shaped cleaver, fruit knives, scissors, serrated knives, and other tools. The initial investigation results came quickly. Mr. Su Du was first struck in the head with a blunt object, then stabbed in the chest. Mrs. Zhuang's cause of death was a stab wound to the heart. What puzzled the police was that the crime scene showed no signs of a violent struggle. Neighbors also reported hearing no unusual sounds. What surprised the forensic experts was that all body parts had been precisely cut at the joints. Both the weapons used and the method of dismemberment suggested the work of someone with butcher-like skills. After confirmation, Mr. and Mrs. Shida's bodies had been dismembered into 32 pieces. When forensic experts tried to reconstruct the remains, they made a shocking discovery. Mrs. Zhuang's body was missing both her heart and liver. Police searched the entire building, but couldn't find the missing organs. However, more urgent than locating the missing body parts was finding the suspect. Based on all available evidence, everything pointed to the son-in-law, Yin Hui. Police used the youngest son, Wen Hui's testimony to reconstruct the sequence of events. Yin Hui had likely killed both in-laws before 4 p.m. on the 29th, then left the misleading note on the door. In reality, he was inside the house dismembering the bodies and cleaning the scene. By 10 p.m. that evening, he was still able to calmly receive his brother-in-law and his wife in the living room. If the couple hadn't been so vigilant, they might have met the same fate. Why would a son-in-law commit such a brutal act against his in-laws? Initially, everyone assumed Yunhui must have done it for money. But when police searched the scene, they found $200,000 in cash along with Yin Hui's ID and passport still in the house. If money was the motive, why weren't these valuables taken? This puzzle could actually be easily explained. Most likely, when Yin Hui realized he had been discovered unexpectedly, he fled in panic without having time to take the money. Yin Hui was 26 when he married the eldest daughter of the Zhuang family, Yu Qin. At the time, was a medical student. When they married, his father-in-law, Mr. Su Du, was very generous, spending $2 million to buy them an apartment on Zhonghua Road in the Wanhua district as a wedding gift. This shows how satisfied the in-laws were with him initially. However, no one expected that Yin Hui would not be content with his situation. While still in medical school, he suddenly became intensely interested in business. As a result, he dropped out of school, fixated on becoming a successful businessman. While the ambition to build wealth from scratch isn't wrong in itself, the problem was that every time Yin Hui invested in something, it ended in complete failure. According to close associates, he had never succeeded even once. Although Yin Hui's family was relatively well off, they couldn't continue supporting his repeated business failures. When he could no longer rely on resources from his own family, Yin Hui turned his attention to his father-in-law. Initially, Mr. and Mrs. Su Du remained generous with their son-in-law, almost always providing money whenever he asked. But gradually, they realized he was like a bottomless pit, so they arranged for their daughter and son-in-law to immigrate to Argentina, where their eldest son had already settled. They hoped that in this new environment, Yin Hui would finally conduct business seriously and stop wasting money. When he first arrived in Argentina, Yin Hui appeared to have changed. Through his brother-in-law's connections, he fortunately secured a position at a slaughterhouse. However, this hope didn't last long. Soon after, he quit this stable job to join a fellow immigrant in investing in an auto body repair shop. The result was disastrous. Within just a few months, all the investment capital had vanished. It wasn't until later that the Zhuang's eldest son discovered that the money Yunhui had invested in the repair shop had actually come from his parents secretly supporting him again. Furious at this revelation, he couldn't help but scold his parents. From that point on, Mr. and Mrs. Sudu finally resolved to cut off all financial support to their son-in-law. Still, the eldest son couldn't feel at ease. He worried that his parents wouldn't be able to resist Yunhui's pleading and pressure. Finally, he suggested having his parents come live with him in Argentina. With him watching over them, at least they could prevent Yunhui from squandering away the family's assets. The elderly couple agreed with this idea and decided to reunite with their eldest son in Argentina. At this point, Yunhui suddenly returned to Taiwan without warning, eagerly helping his in-laws with immigration procedures. Family members believed Yunhui's proactive return to Taiwan was actually targeting his father-in-law's real estate properties in Taipei. He calculated that since the elderly couple would be settling abroad permanently, they would certainly have to sell these properties, so he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity. However, from the current outcome, it's clear that Yunhui didn't achieve his goal. That's why during the night of the murder, while sitting with his brother-in-law, he kept complaining about his in-laws' favoritism. After compiling all this background information, the police could establish that the son-in-law's motive was money. They immediately froze all accounts under Mr. Su Du's name to prevent any assets from being transferred. According to police investigation, when Yunhui fled the scene in panic, he was wearing only a tank top and shorts, with no passport or money. Police predicted he couldn't survive on the run for more than a few days. Sure enough, 3 days after the murder, with no money and no connections, Yunhui had no choice but to turn himself in. However, surprisingly, he didn't choose to go to a police station. On the morning of the third day after the murder, around 8 a.m., Yunhui called the Ministry of Justice, identifying himself as the perpetrator of the Hujing Street murder and requesting to the minister. He explained that the case was connected to a secret Brazilian organization that wanted to destabilize Taiwan. He claimed he was sent by this organization. Because the case was highly confidential, he said he couldn't surrender at a police station. Fearing that if the secret leaked, the organization would harm his family. Yunhui revealed he was calling from a public phone booth next to the Taipei First Girls High School. Soon after, the chief prosecutor of the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office and several high-ranking officials quickly arrived at the location and found Yunhui. To avoid media attention, the prosecutors conducted a secret interrogation of Yunhui. During questioning, he claimed he had acted on the organization's orders, and mentioned an accomplice named Wang. He stated that this superior Wang was the one who actually killed his in-laws, while he only helped restrain and gag the victims, then assisted with dismembering and bagging the bodies. Yunhui explained that Wang knew his in-laws were wealthy and was aware of his poor relationship with them, so he planned this crime. After success, the organization would take a portion of the money as operational funds. While these statements sound completely absurd to us now, in the political context of that era, the authorities couldn't dismiss them outright, especially when Yunhui mentioned previous terrorist attacks their organization had allegedly carried out in Taiwan, providing extensive details. For example, he mentioned a bombing at a newspaper office next to the Taipei station on April 26, 1983. Though no one died, 12 people were injured. Additionally, 22 minutes before that explosion, an elevator in a building on Section 4 of Zhongxiao Road had also exploded. At the time, both incidents had indeed been classified as terrorist acts. Yunhui claimed all these events were planned by their organization. He even named specific individuals who carried out these incidents, providing detailed accounts of each event. However, after several months of thorough investigation, prosecutors began to realize Yunhui was likely lying. While he could describe these terrorist attacks in detail, these were all headline news stories from that time, not secret information at all. When prosecutors asked him to share information that only organization members would know, or about plans not yet executed, Yunhui could only stammer and provided no answers. Furthermore, the supposed superior named Wang was completely fabricated. Yunhui couldn't provide any full name, address, or age for this person. Finally, it became clear that Yunhui had cleverly exploited the authorities' sensitivity to conspiracy theories to mislead investigators. He knew that just mentioning a secret organization would force the government to investigate thoroughly to catch all involved parties. This tactic could potentially drag the investigation out for years. Nonetheless, the prosecutors finally determined that Yunhui was the sole perpetrator, with money as his simple motive. They formally indicted this inhumane son-in-law. At the initial trial, when faced with intense questioning, Yunhui admitted to killing his in-laws for money. However, he stubbornly clung to his story about the accomplice named Wang, insisting he was forced to participate by a secret organization that needed money. However, this claim was firmly rejected by both sons of the Zhuang family. During the trial, Yunhui requested fingerprint comparisons to prove his story. But forensic experts explained that the fabric bags containing the bodies weren't suitable for collecting clear fingerprints, and all the murder weapons had been cleaned. Moreover, since the defendant had lived in the house, even if fingerprints were found, he could easily explain them away. Given the limited forensic technology of the time and the small fingerprint database available, fingerprint evidence proved useless in this case. Finally, the judge concluded that Yunhui's statements were fabrications meant to justify his actions and were completely unreliable. He was sentenced to death. However, when the case reached the appeals court, there was a dramatic turn. The High Court convicted him of continuous murder with accomplices, though still maintaining the death sentence. The court ruled this way because they believed the crime couldn't have been committed by one person alone, citing three main reasons. The High Court cited three main reasons. First, both elderly victims were of large build, making it nearly impossible for Yunhui to overpower them both alone. Second, the murders occurred during daylight hours. If he had acted alone, the victims would surely have screamed for help. Yet neighbors heard nothing. Third, the crime scene had been cleaned exceptionally thoroughly, which seemed impossible for one person to accomplish. Because the appeals court judge leaned toward the multiple perpetrators theory, the prosecutor disagreed with this ruling and appealed. The case was thus sent back to the High Court for retrial. This inadvertently gave Yunhui more time. In the early morning of October 21, 1987, Yunhui took advantage of being released for medical treatment and escaped with two other inmates when the prison guards were inattentive. They used an iron bar to pry off their shackles, then split up and fled in different directions. This gave Yunhui a brief taste of freedom. During the subsequent manhunt, police discovered that Yunhui had a mistress, Mrs. Wu, in Taiwan. Police believed that after escaping, Yunhui would likely seek her help. Following this lead, police went to Mrs. Wu's residence but found she had moved. They left officers to monitor the location, waiting to see if Yunhui would come looking for his mistress. Their patience paid off. Not knowing she had moved, Yunhui arrived only to find police waiting instead of his mistress. To prevent any further unexpected incidents, the Taipei Supreme Court sentenced Yunhui to death on March 4, 1988, with immediate execution. 1 week later, at 5:30 a.m. on March 11th, his life ended at the execution grounds. However, one question still troubled many people. What happened to the missing heart and liver? Initially, all media outlets only reported that the victim was missing a heart and liver. It wasn't until a year later that the press revealed that police had initially returned to the crime scene and taken an inner pot from a rice cooker. As for what was in the pot, official media never disclosed its contents. Yunhui had been singularly focused on success, determined to achieve his dream of wealth. On the surface, this seemed like the same aspiration that most hardworking people share, which isn't wrong in itself.